Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk, an insider's guide to real estate life and the pursuit of happiness. We're live in Charlottesville, of course, across Albemarle County, Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world, on the I Love CVille Network. We're presented by Yes Realty Partners, and on Fridays up until November 2nd, it's Coffee with the Candidates, presented by our friend Dave Fafara at Shenandoah Joe's. Judah Wickhauer is our director, and we have a fantastic program lined up. A show put together by the distinguished gentleman, Keith Smith. If we could, Judah, the studio camera first, and then let's welcome our candidates, who happen to be incumbents, who happen to be running unopposed, who happen to be community stakeholders, and people of positive change.
And have the misfortune of sitting on a couple of boards that I chair, so this is. I have a feeling there's going to be a little a little bit to back and forth here, back my way.
I think this is going to be a great show.
Yeah,
Keith Smith, introduce everybody, my friend.
Yeah. So to my left is Ned Gallaway, the current chair of Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, and to his left, getting this new setup down right, is Diantha McKeel. She is the Jouett representative for Albemarle County. Both have the misfortune to work with me, I guess, directly or indirectly, and I really wanted to take an opportunity just to have a conversation, just four folks having a cup of coffee, talk about, what successes you had last year, maybe what things you wish might have went better, and what you think the future is going to look like for Albemarle County. So I'll pass it back over to my good friend across this. How long is this? Is 8 foot?
Oh, so this is extremely COVID safe here.
Yeah.
Only if we're sitting on opposite ends of the tables here.
Not for the rest of us.
This is over 10 feet here, the new table.
They're elected officials. They have this built-in immunity. That's fine.
That's 100% true. We're going to go ladies first. Diantha, introduce yourself to everybody. Passions, hobbies, and interests.
Diantha McKeel. I have lived in the Jouett district for, I believe at this point, maybe 46 years. Actually in the same house.
That's great.
I served on the Albemarle County School Board for 16 years, and it would be if elected in November, would be my third term on the Board of Supervisors. My passion, I think, was one of your questions.
Sure.
My passion is walking my dog. My book club I really love. As far as the Board of Supervisors goes, I really am very invested right now in transit and transportation in our community. But in my heart of hearts, my passion really is education. And I think...
Former school board member?
Well, that's right. And I say to people, I ran for the Board of Supervisors because I wanted education to have a place at the table. And education in a community is the linchpin for a successful community. And so...
Many people may not know this. You also have a medical background, right?
I do. I taught school, graduated from college, and taught school, elementary. I like the students when they're shorter than I am. So kindergarten and second grade, that's what I taught in Harrisonburg. Mm-hmm. And then moved to Charlottesville, worked at the University of Virginia in administration for a period of time. As many women do, got married, had a baby, right, and then decided to go back to work. And at that time, Keith, the University of Virginia had a licensed practical nurse program that was an 18-month program. And I said, well, I'll apply for that program, see if I like it, and then if I like it, I'll go on and get my RN. Did that, never got my RN, loved the licensed practical nurse piece, and so ended up retiring from the University of Virginia in 2015 from the Department of Cardiology, where I was a research coordinator.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Our youngest daughter is a teacher, teaches kindergarten out in Seattle, and I only could imagine what it's like to do this in a Zoom environment. Could you imagine teaching your 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds in a Zoom environment? I mean, I don't know how she did it, but she did it for a year and a half.
And I thought about that very often over the last 18 months as to what I would have done with my kindergartners and even my second graders. I have the utmost respect for the teachers that have. Yeah.
So Ned, tell us a little bit about yourself, brother.
Yeah, so let's look. This is my first time running for re-election to something. Former school board member, served in 2012 to 15, the at-large member, and then completing my first term on the Board of Supervisors. I moved to Charlottesville in 2002 by way of Shaker Heights, Ohio. I attended Ohio University undergrad. I have a BFA in Theater Arts and Drama. I taught for the Shaker Heights City Schools in the theater department there for 6 years, good grief. And then came to Charlottesville to attend UVA, where I eventually earned my doctorate in education. Obviously, I was, while my wife was in the car business, Julie, she was in the car business when we moved here. I started selling cars as kind of a part-time gig first and started doing well with it. And then still find myself in the car business, which was not necessarily the design plan, but enjoying it. And, running for office initially for school board was a way for me to stay involved in education. So as a former teacher, with my research, so fine arts education is a passion of mine when it comes to, when I was a school board member, just because of my background. So that's why I ran for school board. And like Diantha, you learn quickly what you can and can't do based on where you're at. And you have a lot of influence over policy, you have a lot of influence over the money, but from 2008 to 2015, the way the money was filtering over to the school board was something I went, well, I'd like to be interested in that conversation. And so that was part of the drive and reason for wanting to run for Board of Supervisors when Brad Sheffield decided he was not going to run for another term.
And I will say that when Ned first appeared on the landscape and I realized he was going to run for school board to join me, I was so excited to hear that he was from Shaker Heights, because Shaker Heights has the reputation of being a community that appreciates the arts and education and financially supports education and the arts. And I said, I'm going to like this guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you do not have to look past Shaker to find a place. I mean, their music department had like 12 staff, 12 teachers in it. Our theater department, there were 5 of us, full-time teaching theater day in and day out in a public high school. So that was exciting.
So we have some sophisticated viewers and listeners that watch Real Talk and I Love CVille Network, but many of them might not really understand the nuances, right? Because you guys both come from the school board previously before the Board of Supervisors. They don't quite understand the nuances or the relationships between the school board and the Board of Supervisors. You know, it's primarily money, but can you guys dive in and see how that relationship works and how important that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, from a supervisor level, once you decide what the budget's going to be, and it's not that we decide a specific amount for them, this is formula-based. So there's going to be a certain amount based on our agreement, the 60-40 split, of how much is going to go over to the schools. It's sometimes the nuances beyond that split and what's off the top before the split, and we can get into that a little bit more. But at that point, after we decide and do the budget work, the other places we would have input would be capital improvement projects, the capital improvement plan. We have say or input, I guess you could say, on, what schools and where, because we serve on the same CIP committee with school board members. But after that budget and those capital projects we hit the fence. The rest of it is up to the school board to drive all education policy.
So you really just control the purse strings for and what's going to be built, right?
Like people say control the purse strings, but it's really not. We control the
allocation.
The allocation.
Yeah.
They control the purse strings because once they have it, it's their money.
So we don't have line item veto for the school board. The Virginia State Code determines the relationship between the school board and the Board of Supervisors. And it says that the school board will control the schools as far as operational, all decisions, policies. They are a duly elected board. And so our responsibility is to provide them the money that they deem necessary for the school division. Does that help?
It does help. It just, most folks who have a funny accent
Yes.
like me don't quite understand that there's really a separation of powers to a certain degree
Yeah.
between the board, the board of supervisors and the school
Right.
board, and maybe control the purse strings is a little bit flippant, but in essence it is. You guys allocate money. You can allocate money for structures, which is the capital improvement project, but I just wanted to try to
Sure.
start off with that.
Well, when we
conversation
set the
quickly.
tax rate, the tax rate determines
Yes.
Sure.
what that split's going to be, if you're going to raise taxes to cover certain things, you know, as when we were on the school board, we were advocating for things like
Sure.
that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a close working relationship there.
As with many things, Albemarle County works best when the school board and the board of supervisors work together.
Well,
And
Diantha, I think that's
plan.
kind of like anything, right?
That's what I said.
Particularly
It's
with
like
Mr. and
anything.
Mrs. Smith. Hold on, let me get
Yeah.
that back. No, it's whenever I do what she tells me to do. It works the best.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes. I'm going to walk that one back.
Because she's watching and
I
you know
know that. I know that. I'm getting texts. Behave. Shut up. Stop talking. You know, stuff like that.
But you're right, Keith, because it is, every state's different. And in some states, school boards have taxing authority. In Virginia, they do not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in one of the ways that you can impact, so my first year that you know, at one point in prep for this, you mentioned like, what were some of the things you accomplished? And that, you know, you really have to stop and think over the last 4 years, what did I do or what did we do? My first year on the board, the common practice during budget time, they would do revenue projections. So you try to determine, well, what are we going to bring in? And they would do that projection in December, and then they were not updating it after December. Well, budget time rolls around in February, March. So my first year on the board, right away in the budget cycle, I said, why are we not updating our revenue projections to February, March, and get the most up-to-date amount of money we think are going to come in so that we can program that money right? So what was happening in the past, you would program off an old projection. If the money was higher, then that money was going to reserve. And you can all probably remember news stories about how big
The surplus.
end-of-year surplus was, you know,
was, yeah.
the end-of-year reserve.
Yeah.
So that first year, we said, let's do the new revenue projection, and that ended up, now it's not always going to be a positive, I mean, it can go either way, but in that first year, I think the school division was dealing with a $700,000 or $800,000 budget gap. Updating the projections showed that new revenues would be coming in, and based on the 60-40 split,
were
it
able to
net
cover
them
it.
about $500,000. So now all of a sudden, their $800,000 gap is down to 2 or 3.
2 or 3. A little
And-
bit more
Right.
manageable.
Right.
For that school board to make up $800,000, that's a very different conversation than having to make up 200 or 300, and it was simply based on when the revenue projection was happening.
So Jeff Richardson, as county
Brand new,
executive, brand new, came in and said, we're going to start, we have the December, but we're going to start updating those numbers in February or March.
It seems
when
like
it's
Christmas when you
most-
go to Costco, your
Yeah.
request for information is now starting in October
Yeah.
to our nonprofits
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Well, no, that's okay. He just said we're going to start updating those revenues, and he and the superintendent, Matt Haas, began working much more closely together, because as everybody knows, with your own personal accounts at home, if you don't have accurate numbers, you really can't do very much, or you can make some big mistakes. So now we have accurate numbers, and that helps a great deal in our forecasting and our planning, and working with the board has been, the school board has been a much smoother process.
That's the exact same excuse my wife gave me about not buying the new bike I wanted to buy.
You have enough bikes. You have enough
Look,
bikes.
you always, it's like a car. You always need one more, right?
One more.
Yeah.
Please, everybody needs one.
And I know a place on Pantops.
We know a place on Pantops.
And we'll leave it at that. How about this question that's come in? This is from Crozet. Supervisor Gallaway and Supervisor McKeel, how do you feel Albemarle County is done coming out of COVID? It seems like we're coming out of COVID now. Could you give us a brief description how the county is doing coming out of this pandemic? And that's from Brian, who's watching in Crozet.
You know, and I'll just go first for this one, Ned, and then you can
Yeah.
follow up. But I do want to say that one of the things that I'm the most proud of is the way our community responded to COVID, and how, while it wasn't perfect, COVID brought the University of Virginia and Charlottesville and Albemarle County together. And we said, if we don't work together and implement the same guidance for our community, it's going to be it's not going to be good for the community. So I will say to that question that one of the things I'm the most proud about is we have a great vaccination rate in Albemarle County. We have tried to keep our citizens just as safe as possible, and I think that we've been successful as much as possible during COVID.
So we kind of covered one apiece.
Yeah.
What would be another?
Well, let's get
Well,
Supervisor
go Galloway. Let
Yeah,
Ned take over,
please.
because he might want to say where we are right now, because we're having some good news.
Yeah.
I mean, we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot. I mean, when you look back and you have to deal with a crisis like this, you learn a lot about your organization, and we did that. And, we learned we've got a heck of a team in Albemarle County. I mean, they went back when the pandemic hit and rewrote a budget within a matter of weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
And they did it in a very fiscally conservative manner to say, wow, we don't know, this is before money coming down from the federal government. You have no idea what's going to be out there. And brought back a plan and said, here's the best approach. And it was a phenomenal approach. They did it based on 3 months, 6 months. And we followed that, and we're still following that. Now that the monies are coming down from the Fed in different ways, when you have a plan in place that doesn't rely on that, and then it does start to come, then you can start really figuring out, well, how's the best way to use this money? The final thing I'd say is we're not out of it yet. I mean, we've been cautious. I think Albemarle, you're going to get criticized for everything, but I mean, there were times where people thought we were being overbearing but I look back on it and go, we didn't make, not once do I feel like we did something that was overbearing or too much.
No, I agree.
So I think the fact that we're still in this and still having a cautious approach to this is what's going to allow us to come out of it and continue to come out of it in a positive way like we have thus far.
Yeah.
More questions coming in. This one's from me. How about perspective on why you're pursuing another term on the board? You guys have both accomplished quite a bit. Do you feel that there's more you'd like to accomplish, that there's more work to be done, projects you'd like to see through to the finish line? If so, if you could, offer some insight into some of those projects, what they may be.
Well, the truth is, if you're an elected official, there's always something that you want to finish or complete. It's amazing how slowly things move, to be perfectly honest with you, and what you think you can accomplish in 4 years, you often can't. It may take 6 years. So that's just life. But I will say I'm running again because I feel like I have the energy and the ability to serve another term. I am certainly looking forward to, we're in the middle right now of some work on transit, how to improve transit in our community, which is critically important, as well as transportation projects. I am looking forward to the new pedestrian bridge over 29 that's going to get folks from Stonefield over to the Kmart site.
Plaza, yeah.
Can you imagine how game-changing that's going to be able to connect the city and the county?
Can you give us a
with the
brief update on that? where we're at with
pedestrian bridge. That has been approved for funding under the Smart Scale proposal, and they are in design right now. So VDOT is designing what that will look like, because once the way VDOT works, they have to know something is funded before they're going to commit staff and time to the actual design work, which makes perfect sense. So that's what they're working on right now. So it'll be a few years before that actually rolls out, but I'm excited. They'll be sharing the designs with us when they have something that is good to share.
I've been in this game for over 3 decades, and one of the smartest things that I think that VDOT ever did was get off of its old 6-year plan process to Smart Scale. For those who do not know what Smart Scale is, it levels the playing field for everybody. I was able to be part of the first project, which is the roundabout out in Fluvanna County on 53 and 618 that came through that. So it's once it gets through the smart scale system, it's pretty automated, right?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. It'll take a few years.
And it's been approved. The funding's been approved,
exactly
but it'll
right.
take a few years, and they're working on the design
It'll
now.
be awesome.
Oh.
You'll be able to get from one project to another.
Yeah.
That's desperately needed.
It is, and that
Make
gets...
sure they have a bike lane, though, for us bikers.
Yeah, it's bike and pedestrian.
There you go.
We tried really hard, and I fought hard to get that bridge to built to allow even a small jaunt-sized bus, but VDOT wasn't going to have any part of that because they said it doesn't matter the size of the bus. We have to build it, and it caused the project to escalate and cost
It
so much.
substantially changes things.
Exactly. But, and the other piece I will say is that I'm really looking forward to working with through our Economic Development Office.
That question just came in
Yeah.
about the office. Go ahead.
Yeah, Economic Development and Project Enable. If anyone wants to know about our economic development plan, you can look under Albemarle County Project Enable. That describes it. We have a great team right now in economic development. When I first ran for the Board of Supervisors, the rule of thumb at that time was that a community had to have about 35% of their revenues coming in from commercial, from businesses, to be able to support a viable economy, right? When you think about property taxes versus business taxes and commercial revenues. And at that time, we were, and this would have been 8 years ago, we were saying that our percent was about 18 to 20, which meant that Albemarle County property owners were supporting at a much higher rate their property taxes were supporting what we needed to do in Albemarle County. So to balance better that revenue stream, Ned and I both, and I'll bring Ned into the conversation here because Ned and I have both been big advocates for economic development just to get a better balance to our funding stream so that property owners and taxpayers aren't providing the lion's share of the money.
Can I give
wanna-
you a round of applause on that? Okay, we got our noise machine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to be honest with you, in the past, our community was, when you said economic development, red flags went up for people, and they were concerned that we were talking smokestacks and bringing in all kinds of
Urban sprawl.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think over the last 4 years, we have shown that we can bring in we can encourage economic development through public-private partnerships that work. Willow Tree is a great example. I mean, we could give lots of examples. And that we can support business to bring in great revenues to improve the quality of life in our community without some of the bad
That's right.
history that some folks think about with economic development.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ned.
the county doesn't have to forego their values, their vision,
That's right.
to have good primary business activity.
Exactly.
Which
That's
is going to
exactly
benefit
right.
us all.
Yeah.
And that primary business activity, it's not just about putting up a whole line of retail and stores and things like that. You want businesses here paying strong wages, then those folks go out, they're generating, Roger Johnson does an excellent job of getting this down into a very succinct manner, but when you have folks working in the community, they're having strong wages, they're creating stuff, it's bringing money back into the county. It's not just folks coming here to visit, spend money, then leave, using our infrastructure, et cetera.
Right.
These are folks that are going to live here. That wealth starts to spread around the community, and that is what is going to not keep us handcuffed to property taxes all the time. That's going to start generating more revenue for us in a different way, and we're going to need that to accomplish the things we want to accomplish.
And to Ned's point, one of the things that worried me a lot when I was on the school board and watched the government side of the house was that it seemed like to me we were putting all of our eggs in one basket, and we said, we don't have to worry about our local economy because we have the University of Virginia. They're going to always keep us going, right? Well, anytime you put all your eggs in one basket is not a good thing. And whether it's the tourism basket or the University of Virginia as a economic driver, and they certainly are, and that's great, but you have to look at spreading those eggs out, if you would think about it,
COVID
rather
taught
than putting them in one basket. And that's what we really are doing in this community is,
All types of diversification.
yes,
Always
absolutely.
Works well.
Yeah.
Always works well.
Yeah.
This is a real estate show, we talk about real talk.
There's a lot of real estate questions coming in.
Yeah, so we're going to
We have
have
a lot of
we're
questions.
going to have to
coming
pivot
for
to
you
some real
guys.
estate
Could we
questions.
just talk about education?
Transportation? Sure. No. But, this is all great. I mean, the county that I live in, Fluvanna County, frankly, we killed for an 18% split, right? We're
Yeah.
maybe 4 to 6% on that end of
Yeah.
it as commercial, and we're trying to grow. I just actually was a little late today because I was working on a commercial deal, which I can't talk too much about, but one of their biggest struggles in the area is we're going to bring a certain amount of jobs here. Where are the folks going to live?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Right? And that is, this whole chicken and egg conversation. And as you two fine folks know, I'm pretty passionate about housing and affordable housing on that end of it. So, I have a client that wants to come into Albemarle County. They're going to bring X number of jobs here. And the question is asked, okay, where are my people going to live? Well, how do we answer that question?
Well, we've attempted to say they're going to live, well, they can live wherever they want. There's two different options in Albemarle, really. You can live in the rural area, and that presents you one type of situation, or you can live in the urban or the development area, and that can provide a very different situation. So to have that variety is necessary so that folks can come in and choose. But we've said that the development area is where we're going to put density. I mean, that's the vision. And the reason we're going to do that is to protect that other 95% from becoming more dense. So that's where, from the standpoint of more units per acre, that's where it's designed to go. And you see this play out. It's interesting because the philosophical agreement of the comp plan in that split, I don't think any supervisor disagrees with. But when you get down to actual land use applications and then have to deal with, like we just had Breezy Hill in front of us for the third time, we did RST, Rio Point will be coming to us here in a couple months. Then you really start to go, okay, well now they're getting into the nitty-gritty of the specific area. How does that align with that bigger philosophy that everybody agrees on? And it's tough. It's really tough because anything you put into place is going to deal with it. The citizens have to deal with impacts, and we have to balance the impacts that they're going to, because it's change, whether it's a detached, single-family detached home or it's an apartment building. It's going to be change for the neighbors. And you have to be mindful and respectful of those impacts. Also, the whole while knowing that you have this overarching philosophy that we're going to put density in the growth area.
Right. And we've been
how do
pretty
we achieve
supportive
that?
of that.
Yeah.
And I will say, Keith, just to get to another part of your question, we really are missing that different types of housing. We need to be supporting, I believe, and I think Ned would agree with me, a mix of types of houses for people to choose from. Apartments, condos, you name it, townhouses, not just single-family dwellings everywhere, because that mix is healthy for a community. We also, and I will add, that's one of the reasons why we're working hard on economic development is we need a mix of jobs. We're really missing that mid-level jobs in this community, and trying to get that. So it's that missing middle, whether you're talking housing or employment, that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in running for another 4 years, to be perfectly honest with you.
Was that the foundation for the votes yes for RST? The missing middle with housing?
I mean, the RST vote was that you had a project come out that was going to increase density. I think when I hear missing middle, the units per acre is not as high as what was there at RST.
Right,
it was
right.
somewhere between what an RST development brings but not, a 1 or 2 unit per acre type deal, like
Right.
R1 or even R4.
Right.
So what's between R4 and an apartment community? that's the type of stock that you're providing the folks that maybe want some home ownership, that want that and can't afford to get in at the top prices that we're seeing in the homes. And we don't have a lot of that stock. So small houses
Right.
that actually are on a piece of property that are maybe not a big,
2-acre
quarter-acre
lot,
but
yeah.
Nicole Scrow's project with the
Sure.
small homes, that'll be the first type of thing. Started to see one up on 29 where it was a different type of unit. But that's the type of stuff that I think when you hear folks going, well, home ownership's a way to build wealth and people need to have access to that, which is true, but you can't expect them to start out if it's a $500,000, $800,000. I couldn't have done that when my wife and I bought our first home.
No.
So
There's a place for rental.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
And here's
yeah.
what's
Well, there's a
interesting.
place for all housing.
Exactly.
Our
That's
recent,
right.
well, it was, I forget which report it was now, but at a recent meeting, we were shown the growth numbers, and one of the growing segments of population are retirees.
Mm-hmm.
Our 60-plus crowd has ballooned out. So when you're thinking, well, okay, I get it, but I don't mean to be presumptuous. There are a lot of seniors who are struggling with their own housing right now, and that's a whole nother segment of the population. But when you see that growth going out, that means folks are probably coming here to live out their retirement. They probably don't want home ownership and all of the things that come along with it, so they're looking for maintained, self-maintained type of plans.
According to
Where do we have that?
You want to do it?
No, you do it. We spend way too much time together. You want to do it?
I'll take half.
You
of it.
always
All right, I'll
think-
do half the
you-
first half, you take the back half.
You're like,
Clearly triggered
they're like
something.
married people where they can think
It's,
that.
it's terrifying. My wife says that, his wife says that. All right, you go the first half, I'll
We're
go the next half.
we're actually forbidden to meet outside of this table.
Yeah.
We are forbidden
All
to do this from
You
our.
take the first half.
So, according to Realtor magazine, we are number 2 in the country, we meaning the Charlottesville region, which includes Albemarle County, number 2 in the country for retirees to
Yes.
move into.
Yes.
And the reason how they determine that is there's an app that you can get on to hire a moving truck, and this app said this is so this is
can't believe
real
that.
world people packing up and moving for
Moving
that.
here.
And the third place is
Waynesboro.
Waynesboro.
Yeah.
Really?
Waynesboro, yeah. Yeah.
Well-
And we anticipate the Waynesboro being number 3 because of the spillover effect of housing costs in the Charlottesville
Right.
metro area,
Right.
where the Waynesboro metro area we
Right.
know is more, cost
Right.
affordable.
Right. Well, if you think about it, it makes sense because we have a university, which brings in really a culture and certain aspects to a community. We have a major medical center. If I am at my age, I'm looking to be, I don't want to be in the hinterlands with no hospital, right? I mean, so we have a major medical center. We have an excellent school system, which keeps the quality of the quality of life in this community high, because that's where people want to live, is where schools are good. Businesses want to relocate where schools are good. So it makes sense.
I had an interesting conversation with your colleagues in Augusta County and in the city of Waynesboro. And we were talking about this missing middle and, me doing what I do in these conversations. And it was funny, the almost to an elected official, they said, you know what we're worried about? We're worried about a medical system. Because they have such an influx over there. I think probably, if we count the numbers, I think they probably beat us over there on that percentage-wise, maybe. But their issue is, well, we're okay with our schools, we're okay with our infrastructure. This is what they're saying, right?
Okay,
And,
yeah, sure.
But I think I've been doing this for 3 decades. That's the first time I've ever heard somebody said, we're concerned about our medical system and the influx of people my age, not your age, Diantha, people my age and up, that may be impacting the medical system, which I just thought it was rather strange.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out, so their concern was that their medical system isn't robust enough, is what you're saying.
handle
Okay,
the
I just was
demand.
trying to figure out what you...
Yeah.
These were first meetings, so I didn't ask follow-up questions. I didn't know them well enough to do that.
Well, and I have to tell you that I do live on a quarter-acre lot in the urban ring in a neighborhood that is in the flight plan, from the airport to the hospital.
Sure.
And it's anecdotal, but I hear those helicopters coming over from the valley.
Sure.
And you can kind of tell because of the colors. And we're close enough that we can look up and see them. And I can see that happening, and I understand their concern. The other thing to get back to, Keith, and I had this thought in a minute ago, the other thing that we need in this community are more options for, when you're talking about seniors, apartments, houses that are one-level living and are ADA compliant. We are really missing that because we do have this influx of older people.
So I'll put my...
And sidewalks.
I'll put sidewalks, of course.
We have some developers with questions. Yeah, you want to go to yours?
No, they're probably the same ones. I'll let you
This is
tackle
a
it.
coffee show, so could I have the cream, please?
Sure.
Give the woman the cream.
Thank you.
Okay, so Kyle Redinger watching the program.
Sure.
He's got this question. Are there plans and/or budget increases to resolve staffing shortages in community development and to help review and permit delays?
Yeah, that's an awesome question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
So that's one that we have, and I'll tell you why I think it will happen. Obviously, I can say yes, I can answer that question, but until we do it, words are words. I think that conversation is going to be a big part of our budget conversation this year, primarily because, I think the board is finally realizing that the vision and the strategies that we want to achieve of a county, we do not have the staffing in place to be able to get there. And part of the delays and part of the timing and some of that, it's a two-prong approach. It's not just hiring more people, although that's going to be necessary. It's also making sure antiquated systems get updated and we have a more efficient processing of things. There's a lot of manual touch of information that can be streamlined, and sometimes you don't know a county is doing something when you hear a word like business process optimization. That has been in our budget the last few years. Like, well, what the hell is going on over there? That's taking a HR system or a CDD system, the community development department, or the legal or finance, and streamlining it to get the technology that's available to get some of that, all this extra touch that takes extra time. And then in the big picture, that's going to free up resources to then plug in over here. And that's the type of conversation we've started to have. That is a big one on our county executive's brain. Since he's come in, that's been one of his main pieces, and he's been working on that diligently, department by department.
So that takes that red tape and turns it into green tape. Not necessarily rubber stamping it, but streamlining the process.
I mean, the reality is we can't hire 20 people right away. I mean, there's all these other departments, and they all have similar type of pieces. So it's not going to be an overnight piece. But, I appreciate Kyle's question because at the end of the day, we hear it, we know it, we understand it. We think we know what's going on and why that's the case. We can't just snap our fingers and change the reality of it. We're not purposely trying to do these things, but we are purposely going to try to resolve it. And I know there are a lot of developers out there that are frustrated by it. And like I said, I think personally I'll be bringing that up in the budget conversation, but for other reasons beyond just what I discussed, it's going to be a conversation I think all supervisors are going to be interested in having, because it frees us up and gives us the resources we need to make a climate action plan happen, to make housing Albermarle happen. Because all the things that the developers are hung up on, we're hung up on for very similar reasons. And it's going to free up the resources to allow us all to move these things through in a better way.
And of course, just to add to what Ned has said, what I've seen over the last 20 years as an elected official in the county and I think in all fairness, I understand has been hesitation over the years to spend taxpayer money on upgrading technology and systems. And so what happened was in Albemarle County, our systems were pretty antiquated. We had a website that wasn't even going to be supported anymore. But it's sometimes a hard sell to the community that, and I'll use the word, government needs to spend money on systems and upgrades. They understand that private business has to do that. Well, we're no different if you want us to be efficient.
Amen. Amen. And that's how you position it.
Exactly. That's
More personnel and talent makes entrepreneurs, small businesses, and medium-sized businesses more efficient.
Right, and I heard it all the time is, why are you raising my taxes to do this, this, and this? Well, at the end of the day, we have to, if we want to be a successful community, to support our citizens' quality of life and our business community, right? And the developers in the work they want to do. And it can be a little bit of a hard sell, and sometimes we haven't done a good job over the last couple of decades in doing that. And I will say to Ned's point, the pandemic, because we weren't sure how we were going to come out of the pandemic or what was going to happen, we did freeze positions.
That's right.
And so we froze positions early on as a wait and see, right? And then, of course, the baby boomers, a lot of them, not only in the county but across the country, are retiring. So we had frozen positions, and then we had more positions because of some retirements. And we're coming out of that now, and we are trying to add back in those positions. So it is a combination of
So this is
concerns.
show 215, our chemistry is working. I can see when his fingers are
Oh, my
firing.
gosh.
There must be at least 1,000 questions on that. So we're going to turn this
I'm
over
not
to
up
Jerry.
for
and
1,000
Let me
today.
put a bow on this conversation.
Please.
Because it's, earlier you asked, like, well, why are you running again? What's your interest in that? And, we run, of course, we have projects, we have things that we want to work on, very specific items that are in the county shoot. But we also have an opinion. We have a viewpoint. We have a thought on how we think this is supposed to work. So if a constituent bringing me a concern and the process that I go through, how I think about applications and ultimately make a decision. So when people vote, that's what they're choosing. And it's important for them to know that. So that's one of the reasons I want to run, and because I do have an opinion and I do have a viewpoint on this. And when folks get tired of that viewpoint or opinion,
That's right.
I will no longer win elections.
That's exactly right.
But at the end of the day, CDD, over the last 4 or 5 years, have always brought forward asking for more positions. Of course they have. So, CDD gets the brunt of the complaints. They get the brunt of those who are upset because that's the department that is processing an application that if you're a developer, it costs you money if it takes another month or 2 months. But at the end of the day, that's on us. That's on supervisors to say, okay, we got to get in and fix that and help them with that. And that's through staffing, resources, et cetera. So, we put a lot of attention and things on campaign and elections. If you really want to learn what a supervisor's all about, this is the type of level of focus that needs to be
Right.
done during budget time.
Right.
Because that's when your values
Right.
come out as a supervisor, because you start voting where you're going to program monies based on how you think, feel, and what, what priorities exist. So, but sometimes that doesn't get get the same, play time or air time that a campaign does or
Of course.
election time does.
That's right.
Sure.
Well, I can tell you, anytime you two want to sit at this seat, you're always welcome to come back on the show. This is why I love this.
How are we doing
long-
so far?
This
You guys are
long-
doing great.
We're doing great. This
And I
long-
hope you
You can-
feel welcomed and this is approachable and inviting this setting.
Diantha
Yeah,
and I go way
absolutely.
back.
I
We
mean, you
served in
can tell
school
we're used to
together.
this. We hold town halls together.
Okay.
Ned and I are,
Okay. That's right. That's the
and
goal here.
we agree on a lot.
That's right.
So Kevin Higgins, we're going to get to your comment here. Kate Lucas, we'll get to your comment. Dan Pettit, we're going to get to your comment. We have small business owners, we have realtors, we have developers, we have nonprofits, all in the feed, voters and citizens alike. This is from Kevin Higgins for both of you. What efforts can the Board of Supervisors make in addressing traffic in Western Albemarle? Right now, it's a total nightmare, and it will only get worse with future expansion of home buyers, vineyards, breweries, and tourists. Our roads as they exist today simply cannot handle the traffic. Plus, the Barnes Lumberyard in downtown Crozet is slated for new commercial and residential growth. I cannot imagine the traffic impact that will have on downtown Crozet, 250 and 64. You want to start with that one, Supervisor Gallaway?
Sure, and I don't want this to sound insensitive to the question, but you could probably take 4, 5, 8 other areas of the county and say the exact same thing, too.
Right.
So transportation.
Certainly 29 North.
I mean, this.
Or
We got
Pentops.
growth,
Yeah.
we got more people coming here, and the infrastructure, frankly, is not there to support it. So how do you attack it? I'll use my own district as an example of what would have to play out in similar fashion, and I'm sure Supervisor Malik is doing this in her district. But we have right now a smart scale funded project for the Rio-John Warner intersection, where there's a roundabout that's going to go in there. 3 years ago, that wasn't even on the transportation priority list. So how do you get a project into play? Well, a supervisor needs to get that onto the priority list, see where it ranks, fight to get it down further, not that I had to, because it's a failing intersection, so of course it was a high priority. And then you have to talk to everybody, you have to take votes, and we find out what are the projects that are going to go forward. And ultimately that, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, from the time for it not to be on the transportation priority list to being a funded smart skill application that's going to happened within one term for me. That's fast. So it's the same thing in these other areas. We have to get them on the priority list. We have to see where they rank out. Of course, they're going to score lower depending on where we think they are based in other parts of the county in terms of crash data, fatalities. But this is a problem that exists in several places, and we have to go through the state. We have to go through the mechanisms that are available to us, and we'll continue to do that. So when you hear transportation priority lists usually come in March, April kind of time frame. If you're a citizen and that's important to you, that's when we need to hear from you, so that you're
So it's an important part of the smart scale process that's probably not talked about that much, and this is the reason why the bridge was approved and the roundabout. There has to be projects that are rezoned, that are ready to go, that's around it. It is a component. It's part of the scoring system. So if it's a roundabout to nothing, for whatever purpose, you won't get the funding for it. So it's a component to it that, it's a kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing. That's part of the reason why this Flavanna project worked, because it was a subdivision that was going through the approval process. It was required to get rezoned before the state cut the money or cut the check to build the roundabout. So there's a component to that is not really talked about that much.
That's right. And if you think about this community, and I understand very much the frustration about lack of transportation infrastructure, but we do have a lot of projects in the pipeline. They're going to start rolling out. Right now, think about how frustrated we all were a few years ago with exit 118. Off of 64, dangerous, scary. It's being fixed now. So you're going to see more and more of those construction projects rolling out over the next few years. But I will say that folks need to remember back. I was elected 8 years ago, and this community was in a very contentious discussion about bypass versus whatever. And we deliberately went through a process and ended up through the state with $254 million of construction projects that built the Rio grade separated intersection, the the Brookmar Bridge. We are deliberately looking at this community. We're deliberately looking at as supervisors parallel roads, what we can do, connectivity. That's why we talk a lot about connectivity and parallel roads to help spread the traffic around. That's what we need to do. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to take traffic through your cul-de-sac or necessarily or your subdivision, but that is one of the ways that we can spread out the traffic. I will say that one of my priorities over the next 4 years is to really look at the development area and how to improve the quality of life in our development area. We focus a lot, I think, on the rural area because it's 95% of the land mass, but we have to get back to looking at the development area.
I have several questions for that, but I want to be respectful.
I'm
know
sorry.
The feed's on fire, and Jerry, ask some questions from the feed, please.
Neil Williamson, President, Free Enterprise Forum. For what it's worth, community development is working to fix their problems, but it is revenue center for Albemarle County that deserves additional investment. That's from Neil. More questions coming in. This is from Kate Lucas. She says, what efforts does the Board of Supervisors plan to do about securing fiber optics in all of Albemarle County? Some rural areas like Cosville already has Firefly fiber optics to go, and that's a statement that I can piggyback from Eric LaFontaine, who's the owner of Ben Barbecue in Scottsville. And Eric LaFontaine is concerned about the internet issues that CenturyLink has. Not just internet issues. I mean, there's a lot of folks in Scottsville, as you guys know, better than anybody, that don't even have working phones. And that's paramount for folks that may not be great in health that need a phone in case their health goes bad and they need a rescue squad to show up. Show us yours on that topic.
So the plans would be, because you have to kind of pull this apart a little bit. It can't just be, it's not one answer. The broadband, the fiber, the cable, that we just put, what, $3 million into?
An additional.
So that's the first step into attacking that issue. So when the question is, what are the plans? There is a plan in place. We just allocated funding for it. Some of it we could use from ARPA, and some of it we pulled from the reserve to put over there to kind of match it, and that's through our Albemarle Broadband Authority. So that work, they've got a big chunk of money, and that's the game plan. How do we get this to happen? CenturyLink, we don't have control over CenturyLink. So
Private business.
we have to stand up on a soapbox and do what we can in that regard to try to advocate, when just no different than the Postal Service right now. That's a
And
big
they
issue.
sold their portion of the Scottsville territory, CenturyLink has. So that's part of the reason why that little area has been so neglected right now.
The third answer for cell phone service is one that Diantha and I have been after
Yes.
for the last 4 years. And I'll just tee it up and let you take it. Is our 20-year-old wireless policy. And this is cell towers, basically. And it was formed back in 99, 2001, and we've not revisited it. And look how much has changed.
And Ned and I have been fighting now for 4 years to revisit our cell tower policy. Our cell tower policy, which is 25 years old, the policy is built on visibility. So if a cell tower is visible, our staff has to deny it. We have to get past that, because now we have, and you talk about the Scottsville district. I was talking to Donna the other day about this. Scottsville she was
And that's
complaining.
Supervisor Price.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Supervisor Price. She has a lot of frustration because of cellular, lack of cellular connections, let's put it that way, in the Scottsville district. Our old cell tower policy designates Scottsville as a historic district, and we can't build cell towers in historic districts. So I said to Donna,
So what's going to take the
your
change?
folks are concerned, we have to get that. I have said to several people, we need to just throw that current policy in the trash can. I would suggest that the Board of Supervisors actually formally declare the cell tower policy dead, and let's move on to a cell tower ordinance that we can live with. That actually comes into the 21st century. That doesn't mean we're going to be building cell towers in people's backyards.
Right.
But we have to have the ability. The Scottsville district should not have someone who accidentally injures themselves on a road and bleeds to death because they can't call 911. That is not
Bravo.
acceptable.
Bravo.
Amen. Amen.
I hear a lot of chatter.
We gave you the round of applause. That's what that sound
So
effect
Ned
is.
and I have, and we finally, I think, are breaking through. And I
Yeah.
think that cell tower policy is going to be coming to us, I hope, before too
And
long.
it's not that either of us don't appreciate visual and the
No.
aesthetic of it all.
Yeah.
But the fact is that was the only conversation at the time when these were not so integral to day in,
Right.
day out life. So it was looked at as all these towers are just a passing thing.
Right.
They didn't, and I would have been in the same boat. I'm not trying to suggest I
No.
would have had the forethought to think differently.
Right.
But we need to have that conversation again, knowing what the new reality is.
Right.
And if it's going to be a conversation about does the visual aesthetic overrule the access and the having service on a phone, that conversation's has never happened, and we need that to happen.
Well, it's a life and safety issue.
Well, it gets to, and I have said in some of my campaign literature, you'll see that I'm talking about connectivity, and I mentioned specifically broadband and emergency communications. That gets at the 911 piece. We cannot deny people access to ECC communications.
As Mark McKinney said from the Crozet Community Advisory Committee, cell service is a utility. Fixing
Yes.
this
Yes.
is a must. Props to Ms. McKeel for what she just said. And more comments coming in. Guys, the feed is on fire. You have voters, citizens, business owners alike asking questions right now.
Well, let me just say, this goes to businesses. We want people to be able to work from home. You can
Learn from home.
learn from home, schools, and let's talk about it. lots of times right now, people don't have to go in for a medical appointment. They have telemedicine. You can't do that if you don't have access.
Right.
So it goes on, but economic development is about access, right?
You know, this is like trying to, in my world, this is like trying to sell a car without wheels,
Yeah,
right?
right.
You're right, you know,
Right.
internet, broadband.
That's the first question you get.
It is absolutely the first question you get because it's just become, you know, such an integral part of life that's what you need to do. But you're 100% right. I remember being part of a cell tower 25 years ago, and everybody's felt that this was a fad, and
No.
it ain't a fad.
It's no, but it doesn't mean that we have to have them everywhere.
Sure.
Albemarle County made the deliberate decision years ago that we would not have our cell towers tall because of visibility, but we would build more of them. Well, that's more expensive for the cell carriers. So, and the lower ones with our terrain don't work.
Sure.
We approved one over at Albermarle High School and Ned and I hoped that cell tower was approved so that it could have antennas added from other carriers. It hasn't gotten any interest because it's too short.
There's not enough folks
Exactly,
using it.
right. So we have to come out of this mindset of more and less height, right? And figure out what the mix is. But again, I want people to understand that I am certainly, and I know Ned, we're not interested in going in and building a cell tower in everybody's backyard. We have to think about it strategically and thoughtfully, and where do we need that
Well,
coverage?
more would be more in backyards, less
Yes.
would be in less
Higher
backyards
is
and higher.
better,
So,
yes.
Jerry's fingers are on fire. So
David Toscano, welcome to the show. We appreciate you. David Toscano, friend of the program. Daniel Pettit, Mustache Dan Pettit, has a question for you guys. What is the input or plan on real estate tax increases for the next couple of years? Good question coming from a realtor right there.
Yeah, I think the last time we had a plan got put on hold because of the pandemic. So this year will be the first. We're gonna have to see. We're going through the strategic planning process now. We'll start having our joint meetings with the school board to understand where are we at with our capital projects, where are we at with our strategic plan. So this year, when the county executive brings us the budget to present to us, that should have the new outlay for what are we thinking? Is there a need for a tax increase this year? And then usually we look out years, at least 5 years, and go, well, if you want to do these projects, this is what it could mean to the tax rate. And then we had that conversation. So unfortunately, I can't necessarily answer that right now, but that will be answered come probably January.
It's really too early right now, and especially coming out of the pandemic in the last 18 months has really added a level of clouds, if you want to, uncertainty. I will say, though, that folks need to realize that Albemarle County Board of Supervisors have not raised the property tax every year.
the rate or?
Now, the assessments have gone up.
Assessments.
That's beyond us.
Correct.
That is driven by but we have not raised our rate.
Correct.
And I will say that I think one of the things that Albemarle County needs to look at very carefully are other communities finance school construction is one of the biggest tickets in the capital improvement program.
$75 million, City of Charlottesville, school reconfiguration.
Oh, well, a new high school in Albemarle County would be $140 million probably. Now, I don't think the school division is interested in that right now. Having said that, they're looking at other options. But I think that as with other communities, we should be looking at bonds.
Oh, yeah.
But we have done what, one bond issuance in 40 years? That is, and it was a big deal in this community, whereas other communities issue bonds to pay for especially school buildings routinely. As they pay off one, they issue another one. And I think we need to have that conversation
We had
in
that
this
very
community.
conversation last Friday with Neil Williamson and Sean Tubb.
Did you?
Literally,
I didn't hear it.
Literally had that discussion.
Yeah.
And, from a taxpayer's perspective, a bond referendum it's a project. It's very specific. It's
Yeah.
laser focused on
Right.
it.
Transparent?
It's transparent. You know what you're getting.
Yes.
Then you have a choice, yes
Yeah.
or no,
Right.
right? and then it makes, to me, it makes the path a little bit easier. And I think Neil, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong because he always does, that I believe most of the bond referendums recently around usually get passed.
Oh, and we passed our one and only in 40 years at a 76%, I think 74 or 76% approval rating.
The
So-
lowest,
in our
the lowest
community-
precinct, voting precinct, the lowest percentage, it was 63%.
Yes.
So that's still, I mean, that's still 6 out of 10 right there. That was the lowest one that came in of all the voting precincts.
This
So why don't we do
community
more of
is
those?
education-centric, and we can get a bond referendum passed for schools. I have no problem with that at all in representing that to my community. So that's a discussion we need to have, and look at, this Albemarle County, when people talk about the fiscal state of Albemarle County, we have a AAA bond rating. We need to use our AAA bond rating and
Yes.
leverage it.
Yes.
If
because
not,
we
you can hand it
get-
over this way. We'll use it for you.
No,
I'm okay with borrowing money.
You know, yeah.
And, like, well, why don't we do
Mrs.
more
Smith,
of
not
them?
so
I
much,
think
but I'm
over,
okay.
I think over the next 40 years, we will do
Yeah.
more of them, since we just did one. But there are other ways to use funds that you have effectively. I mean, we just saved, what was the report?
Oh.
$3 million
It was-
because we did the refinance.
Yeah, I think it was
on,
close to 3.
And our CFO brought that plan forward, and based on current debt and getting it refinanced at the interest rates that are out there, has saved us a couple $1 million.
Yeah, I think it was more than that,
And
Ned,
that-
actually.
yeah, I think you're- yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like 3 or 4. It was outstanding savings, yeah.
So, I mean, there's other ways to get at it and to do that. In a bond, you never want to think of, or at least I don't ever want to think of one thing as the silver bullet. You have to have different things to use at different times, and the bond is one of those tools that we
was
can
Liza.
use.
Oh, your dog?
Did you hear that?
I
She just
did, is she
fallen out?
okay?
No, she just did a little shake
The
right
whole
there.
silver bullet thing, you got all excited about.
That's his favorite phrase.
No, Ned knows this silver bullet.
How many times have you heard Smith
Oh,
use
yeah,
that?
this
I
is not a
thought she
silver bullet.
fell and hurt herself,
This is a silver
actually.
bullet.
Neil Williams said, for what it's worth, Albemarle spending is #1 in the region based on the Free Enterprise Forum Local Government Spending Index, #content slinger, with a link to the Free Enterprise Forum.
Can
from
he-
Neil Williams.
is that good or bad? Which?
Well, yeah, and we just gave Neil
I think
an
you should
ad,
give
a
information
free ad, so the
Oh, no,
bill's
no,
in the
no.
mail.
I can finally, in this forum, I can ask questions back to Mr.
That's
Webb.
absolutely right. You can. So this is from Lisa Costello. My dad purchased the house I am living in 1964 for $12,500. His payments were $120 a month, and he was worried about what he had committed to. Mom said, if I knew you were going to worry about it, we would have never bought the house. Dad said that was what he needed to hear, and he never said anything more. He just made the payments. Today, the house, less than 1 mile from UVA, is $240,000 and climbing. It's crazy. And then multiple folks on the feed on fixed incomes, retirees, and baby boomers saying increases in overhead associated with our homes make it difficult because we have set money that we're living on every month.
Sure.
And any cent that goes up above that means we have to sacrifice somewhere else. That's been posted by Thomas, Grace, and Grayson on the program.
Yeah, that's why every year when we talk about when a property tax rate increase has been on the table, this very thing gets
Right.
discussed.
Right.
And there have been years where if you go back and start looking at 12 and 2014, like I said earlier to the question, that this January we'll know what may be future tax rates. But there were tax rate increases programmed over the last 4 years that
That
did
we
not get
didn't.
put into place because we had the wherewithal within the current system to not have to go there.
Right.
So I think Albemarle has an awesome staff, we have an awesome county executive, we have an awesome CFO, and they really know how to look at this in a way that says, how can we best use these funds in a very efficient way? And if we didn't, then they wouldn't be able to come to us and say, we don't have to do
Right.
that tax rate increase.
And that gets to our AAA bond rating. That's how we ended up with a AAA bond rating, which speaks to our staff and the ability that they have had over the years to
Ned, a follow-up question to that. Does Albemarle County have any tax relief programs for?
Yes.
So
Yes.
some folks may not know that. We might want to talk a little bit about that, what they are. And,
Nice.
Yeah.
and how they can help folks out that may be struggling, what
Or a
program-
set budget.
Or,
Yeah.
set budget, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
and our tax relief program is capped at the state level, so we are at the top of, we have offered as much as we can under the state guidance or the state law, right? But we do have tax relief, and you can find out about it on our, I'm going to say that I'm not an expert in this,
Sure.
and I'm not sure where it is right now, but certainly our website has information on it, and, but we do offer whatever we can offer by law.
So there is assistance out there,
There is
right?
assistance out there.
Don't be
That's
afraid
right.
to ask.
That's right.
Right?
And I think that money, if I'm thinking of the right pocket or the right bucket the money comes from, is protected before the split. So there are some funds that are protected
Yes.
before the 60-40 split happens between
That's
local
right.
government and the school. So a program like that, what that means is that comes off the top before you divvy up the rest, and that should give people assurance that that's protected. That's not going to be at the whim of four people can all of a sudden decide we're going to cut that bucket or something in
Right.
1 year. That's protected off the top.
And
So it's
every
unrestricted
year,
capital? Or it's restricted, actually?
It's not,
Wrong choice of words.
when you've got, if you got $10 and there's probably $2 or $3 that gets taken out before the rest of the seven gets
Got it.
split out.
and we talk about those programs, or that program specifically, during budget year, every year, and a supervisor always asks during the budget process, are we at the where we can be, or can we raise that amount anymore, given state law? And then we advertise that program pretty strongly.
So is this the Dillon rule kind of coming back to say you can't go over what the
Well,
state
they
says a little
just,
bit?
yeah, a little bit.
Little
Maybe
bit
not
of
so
that.
much under Dillon,
but
it
yeah,
is,
it's capped out.
they do have a cap, yeah.
Now, this also gets to the earlier point, like we're talking about property tax rate. We've heard from folks that says, well, every penny matters. But when we were talking about economic development earlier, that's where we have to go to find more of that revenue, so we don't have to keep coming back to
Right.
that tax rate. And
That's
that's how it links back and all has to work together.
Right.
Get up to that 38% you're shooting for.
Yeah.
Amen, amen. So this question from multiple people, how would you guys characterize the dynamic or the relationship between Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville today?
Great question.
And then the follow-up question to that is, did the courthouse, they used the word fiasco, I won't say fiasco. I'll say,
Conversation.
did the courthouse evolution impact that relationship at all?
So I'll answer this two ways, and I'm not going to act like what's going on in the city isn't going on in the city. They have some staffing issues, they have some leadership issues that they're working through, and that's not judgmental, that's just
fact.
that's the reality of
Yeah.
it. So the relationship, though, between our staff and their staff for the positions that are filled is excellent. They work together hand in hand. The best example I can give you are the two economic development directors from the two cities know exactly what's going on. You have two that should be competing jurisdictions working together to make a regional impact in a positive way. And that's happening right now. Now, there are places where there are some positions that aren't filled, that relationship is non-existent right now, and that's a problem for us to continue to work forward. And that's something that the city's going to have, they're working on. They're trying to get that figured out. I think at the Board of Supervisors City Council piece right now, as it would be if we were hyper-focused on something in our jurisdiction, that we work on boards and commissions together, there's a relationship there, but they are really focused on what they need to be focused on right now, and that is their getting their leadership house in order, which they've stated. And then you throw on top of it that they've got their, they've got the school configuration plan they're dealing with, their own land use decisions that they're making. So sometimes you have to go, okay, just because we might not be working day in and day out with one another, it's because their focus and priority, I think, right now is in a different place. And once they get there, which they will, then the working relationship comes back at the two board level. Is that fair?
And that's fair, and I think from the City Council Board of Supervisors relationship, I think we get along very well. I think,
Everyone?
well, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I personally am not going to criticize another
Jurisdiction,
elected
sure,
board
okay.
and jurisdiction.
Sure.
I try not to, I don't need to criticize because I don't have all the information they have.
Sure.
I don't live in their world, and I don't fill their shoes. So, but I certainly, when the Regional Transit Partnership, from all of the boards and commissions that I work with and the city representatives are on, we work very well together.
I can speak personally from that,
Yeah,
because we're on the
I mean-
Regional Housing Partnership, the Planning District Commission. Those who question that relationship should watch these. On these roundtables in particular, there's
Right.
a lot of two-way conversation
Right.
that happens amongst the.
Well, here's a natural follow-up question. How do the vacancies because they're numerous in Charlottesville City Hall, how do they impact institutional memory and the connections between the two jurisdictions?
Well,
I think
sure.
that's a fair question.
It is a fair question,
That
but
is fair.
we're also dealing with it in the county because we've
Yeah.
got a lot of people retiring that have decades of service to the county. So that institutional knowledge is leaving. So that's a reality. Even if you didn't have the heightened situation that the city's dealing with, you're still going to be dealing with people that are going to leave and come and go, and you just have to work through that. I think governments know how to do that piece of it. It just happens right now. It's kind of there's a multiplier happening over there. There's a multiplier happening in the county. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
we've had a lot of high
Babe.
retirements happen that have, decades of experience and knowledge has, retired.
Sounds like a brain drain a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, it is, and yet, I always look at, and I don't mean to be certainly not speaking for anyone in particular, but my experience over the years, whether it was at the University of Virginia or in the school board or at the Board of Supervisors level, folks retire and we miss them, and certainly you don't want everyone to be retired if possible at the same time. But retirements are an opportunity to bring in fresh blood
Amen.
and young ideas
Sure.
and different ideas. And I say to folks, I don't want to always hire our employees from within or from without the system. We need a mix, a healthy mix of folks, because that's how we work the best.
Sure. How about this one? How has, with dealing with the pandemic, how has the dynamic of virtual meetings impacted community engagement? And how can we maintain that community engagement as we head out of the pandemic?
That's a great question.
Yeah. So
Because we have a push right now, some folks are wanting us to go back and leave the Zoom and go back to an in-person in the county office.
there
But
a
not
hybrid?
but a hybrid would be.
Hybrid.
Well, I'm just saying what we're hearing from a very small segment of the community, right?
Right. Yeah, there's no going back. We're not
No,
going back to
we're
what
not
we
gonna
had
do that.
before. We've got a hybrid plan in place, and that'll get rolled out and explained, and we're still even frankly trying to figure it out. But, I was very proud of our staff in the county when we quickly kept our board up and running in terms of board meetings and making decisions. Everybody was working from home. We were holding virtual. We turned that around pretty quick.
Yeah.
And this isn't a pat on the back. This is saying, well, we need to still be functional. We just can't shut down everything and come back and see what happens. It's still happening, right? But our team went out. They figured out how to make the virtual meetings happen. We started then to, we purposely pushed some things on the agenda back a month or two just to figure out, okay, how long does it take if somebody's trying to call in and getting them to speak? And let's get those details ironed out so that when we have, I think it was May, after we started going virtual in March, by May we had a huge land use application come to us, and we had 30, 35 speakers. Now, the question, I don't know, would those 35 people have been there that night at the county office building when we were live? I would imagine for certain land use applications, the answer will be yes, but we've had more people now calling in on other issues that we never would have had come in front of us to speak about things. So participation's gone up. We have to capture that so that in the new version, when we come out of virtual, the virtual piece of it's going to allow those people to stay engaged and participate.
So we talked
Staff will-
diversity, right? We've
staff-
talked diversity a couple of times. I think this Zoom hybrid thing is increasing diversity of who is engaging.
Oh,
Yeah, it's getting the
I agree.
9-to-5ers in, it's getting the younger demographics in.
It is.
Parents with kids that otherwise could not come in. For me,
Yep.
I'm more involved with your meetings now. Father, husband, grinding here at work. Having the ability to do it from here or here means I can see what you guys are talking about.
And
Well,
our
you can
staff,
attend 2 meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
Look at what Neil's doing.
Okay, well, he's a ninja.
Yeah.
That's a whole different
our
story.
staff tells us that that in some cases we have increased our community engagement. We've tripled it.
I believe it.
Because we're keeping track of it.
Sure.
So we don't want to go back to the old, everybody has to come to the county office building at 6 o'clock in the evening and then drive home at 9 or 10 o'clock at night in the dark. We don't want to do that. But we have to make sure we get the hybrid right, because it is a little tricky, right?
Well, now, and they will be, they'll be able to if they want to come down, because there is a
Sure,
certain
yeah.
effect or power
Of being
to
in
it
the-
in person
Sure.
that is certainly can have an impact on supervisors. But I do remember one of the early on applications was for a child care center. And the trick is if that evening everybody wanted to come down, you don't know if it's number 2 or 3 on the public hearing list, what time the board's going to get to it.
Right.
So, I remember that night it had a couple applications in front of it, and it was past 9 by the time we were taking public comment on this child care center. And these are 5-year-old and younger. Those folks would not have been there. They might have been there at 6, they would not have been there at 9:15, but the
Or 1:30
virtual
in the
meeting
morning.
allowed them to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't,
You guys are real good about
Yeah,
it.
trying to
well,
get
that
back-
question's come in. I mean, all right, so multiple questions. We have to be mindful of their
Sure.
time, too. So the question, and this is, I'm going to paraphrase, and I'm going to pick and choose through this comment, so it's a little bit more golden rule embodying. So the comment is length of meetings, and it's reference to the meeting that just happened in Charlottesville that ended close to 2. And it seems like you guys are managing these meetings quite better from a time standpoint, as opposed to having marathons that are going 12-plus hours. And the frustrating aspect, and I'm paraphrasing here, okay? The frustrating aspect of a marathon meeting like that is stuff that is getting approved or discussed in the bottom of the 9th inning after midnight.
Everybody's wore out.
Yeah, everyone's wore out.
Everybody's
And
wore
on
out.
top of that, voters and citizens have checked out.
So I can tell you most jurisdictions, and I involved with, most of them, they have a time limit.
As they should, right?
And once it comes up against a time limit, the board has to make a decision to run past that. I don't know if you guys do that. I don't think I've ever seen that.
We time
before.
limit we don't time limit the public hearing. The
Sure,
public
of course.
hearing is going to get the conversation
of
it
course.
needs. But the items on the agenda ahead of, usually from the 1 to the 6, do have time limits on it. And then it's just a matter of making the 6 of us try to stick to that
Right.
as best you can. And sometimes we do really well, and sometimes, you don't. But at the end of the day, at some point, 6 o'clock is going to roll around, you got to get to the public hearings, or the closed meeting if you're going to have something. I'll tell you what we found, and that I think once we go back to the board being in person, right now, if you pay attention to a meeting, each supervisor and the clerk's office determines an order. It's kind of a random way, so that, Diantha was first the other night, and sometimes it's hard being the first person to talk. So Diantha doesn't want to be first every time. No supervisor does. So we rotate it, the speaking order. But when you watch, as the chair, I'll call on each supervisor and say, here's your chance to ask questions. Let's do a round of questions, and we'll do a round of comments. And when we get back live, I'm in the opinion that that's how the meetings should continue to run, because it's made us be a little bit more on point and
Right.
prepared. Now I know everybody's going to get called on, so if you don't want to speak, you have to say, I have nothing to say.
Right.
And when you're sitting in a live meeting, I've done it, you can just kind of casually fade
Relax a
back
little
and
bit.
not talk, because you're not going to get called on. So this calling on thing is more of a time management tool than anything, and it's allowed us to effectively manage the meeting.
And we do talk about time management as a board. That topic does come up because, when you start at 1 o'clock, and we do sometimes end at 10, we don't end at 1 or 2, but we sometimes do after a busy public hearing end at 10.
10, 11
We've had a
this year.
pretty hard day.
Sure, yeah.
And I have to say that I get a little bit concerned because, for me, I've always said I'm not sure that my decision-making is the best after 9 or 9:30 in the evening.
And that's one of my pet peeves, when I run
Yeah.
a meeting, and
Yes.
you've all seen it, and I
Yes.
keep pretty tight to the agenda,
Yes.
obviously if items need to come by. But, Jerry, I've got a question I want to ask, but I'm going to save it for a little bit later. Do we have anything on the feed?
We do, and I want to be straightforward and honest for all the folks that are watching here. We are not going to have time to get to all these comments and questions. There are a number, it's after 11:38. We have
Oh,
to
it
be
is.
extremely
Oh.
mindful of our time. You have a 12 o'clock.
I have a 12
Yeah, she has a
o'clock.
12 o'clock, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. Yeah. So let me do one more, and then go to yours, and then we need to give you each an opportunity to answer this question: why should folks vote for you? So this one is on the consolidation of services in Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville. It's from Bill McKenzie, and he talks about the consolidation of city and county schools and services and anything else that can build or create more efficiencies between the two jurisdictions.
You want me to go first? One of the suggestions that I have made, and you'll see it in my campaign literature, and I've talked about it publicly and have brought it up at the Regional Transit Partnership, I would like going forward to see a return on investment study of what the pros and cons would be and what the return would be to collapse the Albemarle County and Charlottesville pupil transportation system. That's where I think we could start with talking about schools, right? That would, perhaps, a return on investment study would show fewer buses. We would save bus drivers, perhaps.
If you can find them.
Well, and the beauty of it for
the
me,
environment.
and the environment is one of the great aspects of it. We have school buses right now in neighborhoods and on city streets. Albemarle County and Charlottesville school buses passing each other.
Right.
If Albemarle County ran both school pupil transportation systems.
That's a great idea.
Then what would our return on investment be? Sure. And think about this, we would bring all of our bus drivers into one system with the same benefits and the same pay scale, so that we wouldn't be playing whack-a-mole, raise this one by 50 cents, raise this one by 75 cents. We would be able perhaps to do better recruitment. Having said that, so that's one item that I've proposed. The other, when he talks about consolidation of schools, we went through a big study 20 years ago about school consolidation. I am always happy to have that discussion in this community. Having said that, I say to people, you have to think about, is the juice worth the squeeze? That's going to take the air out of everything that we're trying to do for about a year to 2 years. I'm just saying. And we have a lot of things that we're trying to deal with right now. I'd rather look at something specific like school pupil transportation consolidation, right, than to take on school consolidation between Albemarle and Charlottesville. That I have a copy of that report, and I grant you it's 20 years old now, but the end of the day, the return was not that great. You still have, while you may have one superintendent, you still have to have the teachers, you still have to have the support staff.
And the buildings to accommodate.
And you have to have the buildings to accommodate.
Right.
So is the juice worth the squeeze,
How about the
as my
police
mama
forces?
used to say?
But this is why Jerry's question was so important about how do the Board of Supervisors and the city councilors get together.
Communicate.
How they communicate, how they're going to work together, because this is going to require working together.
Oh, you're talking about the school,
Just in
the buses people,
just in
yes,
general, right?
yes.
And these two seats next Friday will be two candidates
Yeah.
for the city council positions open, and we're going to ask the same questions.
Well, and that's the beauty, Keith, of having the regional transit partnership right
Sure.
now, because just an example, that return on investment on a pupil transfer, that can be brought up at the regional
I thought
transit.
you were going to say
and
regional housing partnership.
No.
Just was saying.
And it has been brought up at the regional transit partnership,
sure.
and we've talked about it. That affords us a way to move that forward, right? That partnership. And it has the city and the county at the table.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to talk so long.
No,
I'm
that was
sorry.
perfect. I
Yeah,
don't even
that
know.
was said. That was well said.
I don't
You
have
just gotta
anything
go,
to add.
dup, just like that. Done.
Could you add anything, Supervisor Gallaway, on the police force?
Anytime you have cross-jurisdictional type of things like that, because there's, like we're talking about tax rate. Well, at the end of the day, whatever revenues you're bringing in, you have to make that decision for your jurisdiction. And if you start crossing that, it's like, well, who's responsible? Is it the city council? Is it the county? I can tell you the MOUs to get in place for a regional transit partnership are quite
Right.
the legal document.
Right. Sure.
So to put it out into that type of cross-jurisdictional piece, I think would be really problematic. I don't think in the current state of affairs where we're all at, that the political lift that would be necessary to make something like that happen is currently in existence.
But I think Diantha's more thinking eating the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, that's what I agree.
Not,
I mean,
not
the
that
big
we would ever
picture,
eat an elephant, but if we'd eat it one bite at a time and see
Yeah.
something
Maybe
that,
eating the apple.
Well,
of
it's
eating the apple. But what we want to try to do is what your favorite term is.
Vertical integration.
Or proof of
Yeah, proof of
performance. Try
performance.
something
Right.
smaller that actually works
Yeah,
and
and-
say, hey, look, we can do this.
And I have no idea, because that's why I say a return on investment study, because at the end of the day, I don't know until we look at it if
Yeah.
it would actually save us anything, right?
Yeah.
I just don't know. I'm not an expert in people transportation.
I mean, I wouldn't be afraid of any of the idea. You can't be afraid of an idea.
No.
You can't be afraid of a concept or a plan. I'm all for it, but when both jurisdictions have priorities that they want to get to, that would take up all the air in the room to consider, even to study that, and we have other
Yeah.
things that need to happen.
Right.
So I left the 22nd and the 29th open for this very reason, that I figured we were not going to get to everything today.
Yeah.
And it's a quarter to 12.
I'd say close to 40 individual comments or questions from people we're not getting to here, at least. Why don't we...
Mine's a little heavy lift, and I don't think we're going to be able to tackle this on it,
Okay.
but it's about the urban ring and expanding it, and what does that might look like to you guys? Is there any appetite to do that? I don't think we have enough time to take a deep dive.
Are you asking about the development
Development
area or the
The
urban
urban
area?
ring around the development area, which is supposedly 5%.
Okay.
Right? In reality, it's much less than that. We just had this conversation about missing middle and trying to increase affordable housing. And, I'm a simple guy from my developer's perspective. Well,
Right.
I need space to put these in this urban ring. Is this a heavy lift question for today, or is there any appetite to kind of tackle that in a couple of minutes left?
Well, I mean, I've made this comment at the last couple of meetings, and just again during the Breezy Hill application. We have to start being mindful that if we have defined development areas and we're not allowing density into them to the extent that they're coming forward, that's ultimately going to bite us in the butt when it comes to wanting to protect that 95%.
Sure.
So if you don't allow it or allow it to get in there, at some point, the 5% is going to be full. There's not going to be any more room. And then what happens? Then that conversation is going to rear its head. It's going to say, well, wait a minute, we may need more development area. I said it the other night. I said, if here's a supervisor that brings up wanting to put density in the rural area, that would be a problematic statement for an Albemarle County Board of Supervisors
Right.
member to make. But we have to go, like Breezy Hill. This was an 80-unit application, and I'm not trying to suggest or be insensitive to the folks that those 80 units aren't impactful on the folks living there. But that project came forward at an R4 rating, which I think was 180,
180, 60, yeah.
And I was on the record of being okay with that.
Yeah,
I
I was
voted
too.
for that. Because if you don't allow that density there, then that density gets pushed somewhere
goes someplace.
else.
Right.
And if it's, at some point, the development area where the density is supposed to be doesn't house it, doesn't collect it, then the question you're bringing up is going to be one that this community is going to have to deal with at some point in time.
And I agree with Ned completely, and he and I say this in almost every land use proposal that we have now, if we don't support density here in the development area. Having said that, I will say that I do agree with many people that having the rural area designation really is the most effective way to protect our waterways and our environment, and I get that. But for me, I'm not ready to even have that discussion, because look at what we have right now on Rio. We have abandoned shopping centers. We don't
nearly
want
abandoned mall.
Why would we expand the development area now when we have space that's just sitting there right now that needs to be developed?
And to be clear, we're not saying that you just approve density to approve density.
No.
When the Rio Point will come back before us, when it was at first in front of us, I voted against that project. And none of my arguments were that it was too dense. There were people that were unhappy about the density, but my arguments against were more about the impacts that particular project and the timing of the project. And since then, we've had a corridor study now in place. A smart scale application has come through for one of the major infrastructure pieces there. So we're going to consider all the impacts as well we should and need to on every application. So it's not like, oh, you just get a green light. McKeel and Gallaway are going to just approve density for density's sake.
No.
We're still going to scrutinize it and make sure it makes sense for the area it's in. But we have to be mindful of that bigger philosophy where we said we're going to protect 95% of this county and not have it be growth area.
And it's why I say right now, we have to start looking at the development area and the infrastructure to keep the quality of life, because then hopefully we won't, if we provide quality of life in that development area, hopefully we won't get as much pushback from the community about expanding the development area.
Diantha, thank you. Ned, thank you.
We should give them the opportunity, and you're up against the gun here, about why folks should vote for you and vote for Ned.
Stick with yours.
No, just flip it around. Why some people should vote for Ned.
I would love people to vote for Ned.
Likewise.
I would like to work with him for the next 4 years. I'm not sure, I can answer all these other questions, but I'm shy about why people should vote for me.
Your
I think I
experience.
have the experience. I really have tried very hard to support my community, the urban ring as well as the rural area of my community. And I'm at a loss for words.
My priorities remain public education, public safety, and economic development. That's what I ran on 4 years ago. Those are still my priorities. Earlier I said that, as a supervisor, we have an opinion, we have a view, we have a way that we go about thinking about things. And I think that's a good way to go about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be putting myself forward to say, I think this is a good way to go about it. So I'm suggesting to folks that I'd appreciate your vote if you like the way I think about applications. That's all on display as we work through these things when we meet together as a board. And that's what I have to offer. At the end of the day, I enjoy the work. I like working through the policy issues. I like working with our county executive and his whole team to try to make the county a better place. I mean, we both enjoy that work. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in a 12-hour meeting if you didn't enjoy the work. So I enjoy
Or the
it.
prep time that it takes to prepare for
I want to
12 hours.
continue to do it, and as long as the folks in the Rio District are satisfied with my constituent service and the way I think about things and the way I go about it, then I certainly appreciate them to continue to vote for me.
And he said that a lot better than I did. I have a hard,
You're just very humble.
I have a hard time talking about.
There's no humble over here.
You're humble too.
Anyway, I love my community. I say I'm an urban ring kind of girl, and I want to make that urban ring just the quality of life that it should be, right?
So we're coming on a
Yeah.
hard stop here, guys.
We do.
Thank you.
You guys were great.
This is what I love about this show, what we do 3 times a week. It's just long format. We get into a conversation, and you all know me well enough to know for me to shut up for any length of period of time is an achievement.
Hold on.
And we didn't even get to affordable housing.
That's right.
Well,
And that's what a lot of the questions are. Why don't we do this? We'll close this. I will archive the questions. Probably 43, 44 ones we didn't get to here. I will archive them and maybe relay them to the supervisors if they're willing to come on again. We have 8 minutes before her 12 o'clock. She's got to go.
I do have
She's
to
got
go.
to go.
they don't know they're going to get hit up for another sit down a couple of
It's
weeks
got
from
to
now.
go. This is Real Talk,
I lost
guys,
track
on
of
the
time.
I Love
Thank you,
CVille
guys.
Network. Thank you to Shenandoah Joes for being a part of the show. Keith Smith, Supervisor Gallaway, Supervisor McKeel, Judah Whitcower, I'm Jerry,
And
Liza
Liza
the
the
dog.
dog.
yes.
Can't forget Liza the
You
dog.
guys have a good morning,
Thank
and
you.
keep the business local, guys, here in Central Virginia. Take care. Excellent,
Thank
guys.
you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
It was
you.
all good.
Yeah.
We're fantastic. You guys-